Hey everybody, welcome to Garden Time with Belle. We are in the third week of September, and that means if you have hydrangeas in your garden, this is the perfect time for you to cut those hydrangea blooms and bring them inside. You can dry hydrangeas so easily and enjoy those gorgeous blooms all winter long, and actually for as long as you want. So today I thought I'd take you along with me as I harvest some of my hydrangeas. I got some Little Lime Punch I'm looking over there, and I've got Limelight Prime, and they are putting on beautiful, beautiful antique rose color that I want to capture and dry and enjoy inside the house. So before I take you with me, I'm going to invite everybody to please like and subscribe to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I am so glad you found Garden Time with Belle. I am just a home gardener here in the state of Missouri, enjoying the beauty of the season and sharing with you all some of my gardening adventures, and also learning from you all about what you're doing in your gardens this time of year. So anyhow, before we get into it and before we head over and start harvesting, I hope you're noticing here my two aqua pots, my big containers that I recently swapped out summer and put in some beautiful things for fall. In fact, I'll link the video to that process on the screen for you. If you haven't seen that video on what I used for this year's fall arrangements, you might want to check that out. So this project could not be any simpler because you only need two things. You need a really good set of pruners, and you need a bucket of water. And here is my bucket. If you follow my channel, I've talked about these black buckets before, and I'm going to encourage you all to go to your local florist. In fact, in my case, I went to my grocery store. They have a floral department, and probably a couple years ago, and I just said, hey, do you all have any extra black buckets you're not going to use that you would give me? And they said, absolutely, because typically what they do is they just recycle them. They can't keep them all because they get a lot of their orders in bulk in these big black tubs. And I use these all the time in the garden. Those of you that follow Garden Time with Belle know that I love to grow cut flowers. I love, of course, flowers in the landscape outside, but I equally love bringing that beauty in the house, not just reserving it for the garden. So anyhow, check out these black buckets. If you garden, they're a lifesaver. So besides us heading over there in just a minute and cutting my hydrangeas and harvesting them, I'm also going to share with you some tips and tricks on, when is the best time to harvest your hydrangeas for drying, because that's really important to know. And then how to do it, how to make your cuts, how to preserve them. There's lots of different ways. This way I'm going to show you today is just my preferred way. I think it's a super simple way of doing it. And then what might you do with your hydrangeas once you've dried them? So that's what today's video is all about. I'm super excited to bring these beauties in the house and enjoy them for months to come. So time for me to grab the camera, and we're going to head over there and start harvesting. So I've made it over here to some hydrangeas that I'm going to harvest, and these would be my Little Lime Punch. I would say if you are new to hydrangeas and you want to grow some for the very first time, I can't say enough good things about Little Lime Punch. They get about 3 by 3 or 4 by 4. Mine are closer to 4 by 4 foot wide. They are in their fourth season, but gosh, they have grown so fast and done really well in my garden. So I'm going to grab the camera. I'm going to bring it in nice and close so you can see these beauties, and I'm going to show you where on the stem I'm going to cut them so that they'll dry the best. Okay, let's talk about when to cut your hydrangeas for drying. And that is probably the most important decision you need to make, is to know when it is time to cut them, when they'll dry the best. All of these are very mature, meaning they've gone from the lime green in the spring to white to pale blush to now this beautiful dusty kind of rosy antique pink. And you want to feel the flowers, and you want the flowers to feel a little bit papery. You don't want them to be underripe because if they're really young and new, they're not going to dry well for you. But these are all quite mature. In fact, I probably could have started harvesting from these a couple of weeks ago. It's just been super busy, like all of us, right? And it's best to try to cut them when it hasn't been really rainy. And we've had rain off and on for the last couple of days. So finally, it didn't rain last night. And so I think today is the day. So that's super important. So there's nothing on here I can show you that is too young to cut for drying. But when we get around the corner here and we look at the Limelight Prime that I'm growing, I will show you the difference between a mature blossom to cut and one that you want to leave on the plant. So, all right, I'm going to bring in the camera really close and we're going to look at where on the stem I'm going to make my cut. But just like almost all cut flowers, you want to follow the main stem down below the bloom, and you want to cut above a set of nodes, or when the stem has two leaves on either side, that's the best place to make your cut. All right, just time to cut these Little Lime Punch hydrangeas. And because they are a smaller version, a smaller type of hydrangea, I'm imagining that my stems are also going to be a bit shorter. And that's okay because I'm going to use these in a variety of arrangements. So don't be concerned about the leaves looking horrible. Like, that's awful, right? And the reason why I have black spot on my leaves is because here in my mid-Missouri garden, it is a hot and humid place. And usually by the end of the summer, that's when my leaves start to look pretty yucky. So anyhow, so can you see that? And so in terms of those nodes I was talking about, if I bring it in close, I hope you can see. Let me put it here by my hand. These are nodes. Okay, so these nodes will send up more branches. So you want to cut right above a set of nodes, which I've done down here on the bottom. So that's my first one. I'm just going to get after this, and I don't know how many I'm going to cut, but I'll just see what happens. So, all right, time to put this in the bucket. So I've moved down here to another garden bed, and those of you that follow my channel know that this is my challenging bed. This particular garden bed faces east, and it tends to stay pretty wet, pretty moist. And so I've tried to grow things in here this year that tend to like a lot of water, and hydrangeas do enjoy a lot of water. They don't need quite as much once they're really established, but these beauties are Limelight Prime, so a different variety, but they're both panicle, and they look quite similar, don't they? But these will eventually get 5 foot tall, and so I'm 5'5". So, you know, somewhere in this zone I would expect, but they're just in their first year. So remember earlier I told you the most important thing to know about cutting hydrangeas for drying is to make sure they're mature enough and they're already sort of on their way to drying. So this is a perfect example. I'll cut it. Perfect example of one that is perfectly ready for harvesting. And you see how much taller the stem is because this is a much larger variety of hydrangea. All right, so nice long stem that I can mess around with depending upon the vase I'm going to use. So this is a perfect one to harvest because the leaves are mature and not kind of floppy. What wouldn't be a good choice for harvesting would be this one here. See how it's still white? So any of these that look like this, they're too new. They're still immature. And when you touch the blossoms on this versus this, you can feel the difference. Those white ones are new flowers, and they're loaded with moisture, which would take forever and ever for them to dry out. Plus, they would probably wilt. So Yeah, so I don't know how many of the tall ones I'm gonna harvest, but I'm just gonna get after it. And then we're gonna go back in the greenhouse. I'm gonna show you some of the vessels I wanna dry them in and talk about different ways of drying your hydrangeas. Okay, I'd say we have a nice little collection here. Time to head back in the greenhouse. Now that we're back in the greenhouse, I want to share with you all 3 common ways to preserve your hydrangeas. The first way is the simplest way. You harvest your hydrangeas like we just did. You stick it in a vessel, put it in your house in a cooler area that doesn't have any direct sunlight. So it doesn't have to be dark, but out of direct sunlight. That's really important. Leave it 1 to 2 months. Done. Okay, so that's one way. Today, though, I'm going to do the second way, and that is I'm going to pour a couple of inches of water into my vessels. I'm going to recut the stems, pop them in that little bit of water, and then let that water slowly draw up into the bloom, and then just let it evaporate and dry out. Again, it takes a couple of months for it to be completely dry. Then the third way, which I've not tried, full disclaimer, but I do see people, other gardeners, like to mix some glycerin in with their water. Supposedly, if you do that, then when you dry out your hydrangeas, the actual blossoms here don't get quite as fragile. So if you're going to use it in crafts or, later on in the fall, which I'm intending hopefully to be able to make a wreath with my dried hydrangea blooms. But supposedly the glycerin will keep them a little bit more pliable and not quite so crispy and fragile. But today I'm just going to show you how to put it in a couple of inches of water, and that's the method I'm going to use. So let me grab the camera, and I want to show you. Actually, I'll just leave the camera where it is. I want to show you the different vessels I'm going to use today. So let me show you some of the containers that I chose. I chose these 2 vases because actually these sit on my mantle in my house on the ends with some other blue and white decor. And so I thought, yeah, that would be awesome if I could have some hydrangeas on the mantle. So that's going to work out hopefully. And I probably won't need very long stems for these. And then this vase is actually an antique. Gosh, I would say this is probably a good 60 years old at least. My husband's grandmother really was very enamored with floral gardening, and she was quite the flower farmer in her own right. So anyhow, I have a lot of her antique. And I picked this one in particular because look at this beautiful green. And as you can see, of course, the varieties that I'm harvesting have some of that beautiful green. So I just thought, wouldn't that look pretty? So that's why I chose that one. I've got this white pitcher that I think is really cute. And of course, I live in the country, so this is really kind of casual. And then I've got this heavy brass bucket. And the brass bucket might just be for overflow because, as I said, I'm going to use these not only in vases, but I may go out in the next day or two and even cut some more because I really want to see if I can manage to dry a bunch of them so that I can create a wreath for winter. So that's what I've got. So let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm just going to grab my 2 vases that I like to have on my mantle, and I'm just going to put a couple inches of water in each. All right, so I think, let's just see what happens. I'm thinking, groups of 3 or 5 or 7 always look better. So let's see if 3 is going to do it. I think 3 is going to be perfect. All right, so I mentioned earlier, though, that I've cut it once above a node, and now I'm going to come up on the stem just a little bit and cut it on an angle so it can really draw up some more water. I'm going to give it a second cut and pop it right in. All right, and so, yeah, I'm going to mess around with different ones. Let's see here. And different shades and different lengths. So let's just see what happens. And different sizes of blooms, they're all a little bit unique and special and different. So why not, right? Why not have a variety of sizes? That one's a little bit too long, so I'm going to give it another cut and nestle that in. That's kind of cute, right? All right, let's do these. And I'm not usually this fussy, except that when you have matching containers on a mantle, I try when I can to get them to be somewhat uniform in terms of their size. So let me cut this one. So there's a group of 3. And then if I compare it to this one's a little bit too tall. So I think I'll give it another cut. Yeah. Okay. Pretty. All right. So we'll put this out of the way for now. And let's take a look at this beautiful sagey green antique vase. Again, oops. You don't want any flower debris in there because that grows bacteria. You don't need floral food. We're just drying these. A couple of inches of water. So again, why am I adding water? Well, when I am putting these in, I do want them not to wilt right away. And so typically if you add some water at the beginning of the process, it will help them draw up water, and then start the drying process. So let's see how this is going to work. Well, this was such an easy and fun project today, harvesting these hydrangea blooms for me to dry inside the house. So remember, you're going to cut your hydrangeas, you're going to put them in whatever vessel you want them to be in to dry out in. You'll take them inside your house where it's much cooler, and you just want to make sure wherever you place your cut flowers, they're out of direct sunlight. That's super important. And give them a month or 2 and they will get crispy and be perfectly preserved, and they'll preserve this beautiful color all the way through winter. Of course, I already filled up these 3 vases just like that. So after today, I know that I'm going to get out there, especially the limelight, little lime punch ones. I'm going to get after those because there's so many blooms on those. I'm going to harvest a bunch of those because I do want to try to gather up enough and dry them so that I can use them in some of my holiday decor. So anyhow, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today as I got to show you the basics on how to preserve your hydrangeas. If you have hydrangeas outside in your garden right now, this is the time. Grab your pruners, grab a bucket of water, get out there and cut some of these gorgeous flowers. Bring them in your house so that you can really enjoy them for months to come. So until next time, I'm going to wish everybody out there happy gardening.